All right, guys, welcome to another 2026 roster prediction. You guys know Tack or Filippo from Tactical Manager TV. We've done these every 3 months before the last World Cup and since then to try to predict the next World Cup's roster. Now, we're still 2.5 years away, so it's still quite far, and a lot of things can change. However, the last time we did this video was in August, I believe, or July after the Gold Cup. So a little more than 3 months now. But then we didn't know that Berhalter would be back. Or we knew Berhalter would be back, but we didn't have any idea what his new rosters would look like. So at least now we have a few camps of his rosters to get some idea. Because remember, this is presuming Berhalter is going to be in charge in 2026 and what his World Cup roster will be like. But Tack, how are you doing, man?
Doing good. One thing I wanted to add in that I find interesting when thinking about cycles. So in 2018, when we failed to qualify, we knew that in 2022 we would have a completely different roster from the one that failed to qualify. I think only from the one that failed to qualify that made it to the 2022 World Cup. Who was it? Pulisic, Acosta, and that might be it. Anyone else?
Yeah, because Areola didn't even make it.
No, so Pulisic and Acosta. So two players that failed to qualify and were in the 2022 roster. Now, the 2022 roster to 2026, I think probably at least 12 to 14 players will make the roster. At least. I think the ones that won't be there are mainly the MLS guys that were Gregg's favorites, like
none of them
Jack
will
Moore, Yedlin, Roldan, Morris, Jesus. Those guys won't be there. Walker Zimmerman, they won't be there. But the core of that team will be the same. And Gregg, we're going to talk about this, has already kind of moved on from almost all those guys besides Miles so far from the data we have, which means I think the 2026 roster, it won't be exactly what we're about to say, but I think out of these 23 players that we're going to list, I wouldn't be surprised if we get 18 right now.
Yeah.
Injuries aside, of course.
Sure. So obviously we assume everybody's going to be healthy. Now, guys, typically what we do with these videos is we go from 3 months before and we look at the old video and we see what we said, and then we compare it to our new picks. We can't do that this time because, as a lot of you guys already know, had to delete a bunch of my videos so that video is not available, but it's okay. We're still going to sit here and go, this is what we think it's going to look like in 2026, right? Tack, let's start with goalkeepers. Who do you have as yours? So we have 23 because right now it's 23. We'll see if it changes. I personally don't think it will, but for now it's 23. If they change the rule back to 26, we'll change with it.
Just to make it clear, this is what we think Berhalter will do, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not really what I would want. Okay, so what I think Berhalter will do for goalkeepers, Matt Turner, I don't see him losing. He could even not be a starter by then, depending on what happens. I just don't see him losing a roster spot, Matt Turner.
It would need to collapse the level of Stefan. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
yes.
2.5 years before Qatar, we all thought Stefan was going to be our starter.
So it's more about Turner collapsing rather than the rise of other goalkeepers for him to be out of the roster. So yes. I think Turner will be there. I don't think we'll see another collapse like that. I think Ethan Horvath will be there too for a couple of reasons. He'll eventually find a home, like a team that he'll play. Clearly, Gregg Berhalter likes him. He's been bringing him in, even though he hasn't been playing, has been in touch with him, asking him to find a team to play. So Horvath. And then number 3, it kind of just becomes who will probably be the young goalkeeper right now that will be ready enough that Gregg will bring as a third option. So options, just to make clear, Gabriel Sonina, Patrick Schultz that just won MLS Cup with Columbus Crew, Celentano from FC Cincinnati, and then maybe like Drake County, he's not as young as those, is an option for Gregg. Gregg has brought him in. Those are the only what? Sorry, Brady also very young, same age as Slonina. I'm going to go with the safe bet here. I think by then Sonina will have developed more, and he's probably the highest ceiling one. So I'm going to say Turner, Horvath, and Sonina will be the 3 goalkeepers that Gregg will bring to 2026.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep my same 3 from last time, which I remember very distinctly. I have Matt Turner, Gabriel Slonina, and Chris Brady. And the reason I have Brady and Slonina is because for what they're doing at the ages they are at already, it's clear they have the highest ceilings in the pool, those 2. Coaching as well, but Coaching is even younger. He's barely 17, right? So it's like give him, to be a goalkeeper, he'd have to be 20 or 19. He'd be 19, which is how old Slonina and Brady are now. I can't quite see him being ready yet. But if I look at their trajectory, I mean, Slonina, I was worried about him going to Chelsea because I was like, okay, is he going to drop off? Chelsea's not great with development. But they seem to have loaned him to a good place where he's continuing to improve. Brady's in a situation in Chicago now where he's playing, not only playing regularly, but they're playing out of the back. So that's good for him and his feet. I think both of them are going to continue to get better over the next 2.5 years to the point that they will surpass all the other goalkeepers not named Matt Turner. But
No.
again, it's like that's what you look at their age and their trajectory. But like, yeah, Patrick Schulte could surprise us all, or Roman Celentano could have a major boost. You just don't know.
My question to you is this: you have 2 goalkeepers in your list that will be 21 or 22 in the World Cup. Do you think you would bring Matt Turner and then 2 22-year-old goalkeepers?
Yes, because it depends. If you're starting regularly for a very good team, then it doesn't really matter how old you are, right? So if you look at Gago Slonina now, this season he's in Belgium. He's playing well enough that he could maybe next year they loan him out to a better league or a better team, right? Let's say the Eredivisie or the Championship, right? So that still gives him another full season before the World Cup to play at an even better level. Maybe he's not Chelsea level, but then maybe a Bundesliga team buys him and he's a starter in the mid-table Bundesliga team come that World Cup. So if he's a starter in a Bundesliga team, he's in that roster. Same for Brady. I don't think Brady is leaving this year. I think he'll do one more year in Chicago. I don't think it matters so much about their age. I think it matters how and where they're playing. Because 22 is young, but it's not like it's an 18-year-old.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. My only concern is if he would bring 2 young goalkeepers. That's why I put Horvath. It's kind of like he put 2 experienced ones. Plus, Turner was in the World Cup in 2022. So was Ethan Horvath. So 2 guys with experience, one of them on the bench. And then he would bring probably 1 goalkeeper that is young, like you said, Brady or Sonina, whoever is probably on a better trajectory by then. We'll see.
I guess we'll see, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the ones that I put. I think he's going to go with 2 experienced goalkeepers and then a young one. I think that would be a high for the World Cup, but going on.
Yeah, no worries. Let's talk about fullbacks. So again, this is what Berhalter would do. I'll start with fullbacks. I have Dest, Scally, A-Rob, and Lund. And the only reason I have those 4 is because that's who Gregg is currently bringing. And I don't see any young fullbacks that I think are going to definitely, like maybe they could. Maybe Jonathan Gomez or Caleb Wiley or John Tolkien or Brian Reynolds could push their way in there somehow. I don't think any of them is like sometimes you look at a U20 level player and you're like, that's a definite hit or that's an 80% hit. I don't look at any of those fullbacks. I think they're all 50-50, some of them lower. Like a lot of people are very excited about John Tolkien. I think John Tolkien is super mediocre technically, for example. So I just don't see anybody breaking in the next 3 years.
Yeah, so let's go by parts here. I have the same ones in my list because we're going based off Berhalter data, and based off Berhalter data, that's what he's been calling up. However, I'll say this: Des, Scally, and A-Rob, based off projections, I just don't see them not making the roster. I just don't see that happening unless they're injured or they have a major injury in the next few years, something like that, which hopefully none of them do. The 4th fullback becomes something between, right now he's been calling in Christopher Lund, but we talked about this on the other video, the gap between Lund, Tolkien, Daewon Jones, it's almost like irrelevant. You don't want to get into a situation in the World Cup where you're playing any of these guys. Yeah. And then you have Caleb Wiley that's like 18 now, has to see how he develops. I don't know. He seems to be a high ceiling player, but he's progressing very slowly right now in Major League Soccer.
So real quick on Wiley, if he leaves MLS now, which I think is actually time for him to leave, I think he has the chance to improve. But I think if he stays, he's going to stagnate.
Yeah, that's the main issue. It's like projecting 3 of the fullbacks is very easy. A-Rob, Dest, and Scally, I don't see them falling out of this roster unless they get injured. Right now, I'm going to throw Lund in there, but this one can literally change. Like, let's get the Nations League, and then Berhalter calls Tolkien instead of Lund. And then all of a sudden, Tolkien's ahead here on the projection.
Yeah.
it's something that would be nice to have figured out by 2025. Have like another fullback there, like, you know what, I'm kind of comfortable with this guy playing. But right now, it almost seems like a situation where if Scally or A-Rob, one of them can't go, you just don't play any of those guys. You play Scally on the left back or whatever. But
yeah, and we talked about this in the other video too. But Adams and Weah can play fullback in a pinch. Trusty can play fullback in a pinch. Like, there are options. Kevin Paredes, if he's in that roster, can play fullback in a pinch. So there's options. We have 2.5 years to figure it out. That's the truth. They have 2.5 years for one of them to stake their claim and go, no, I'm the second best left back in the pool. I deserve to be there. Let's go to center backs now. You go first on center backs. How many did you bring?
4. I think he'll bring 4 this time.
Same.
That's what he's been bringing in these 3. We had 3 rosters with Gregg.
Yeah.
We had September, October, November. I have Richards and Carter Vickers. They're young enough. They'll be closer to their prime. Carter Vickers will probably be in his prime in 2026.
Yeah.
I don't have Tim Ream because I think right now he's still in the roster. He's still a starter, but we're seeing him slow down a little bit more, and we're still 2.5 years away. Could he make the roster? Maybe be a backup, a leader? I think there is a possibility. I wouldn't bet on it. So then I have Richards, Carter Vickers, Trusty, that I think is emerging there. I think Trusty will end up being one of those guys that plays for a good championship side, almost like a yo-yo player, like going back and forth in the leagues, but like Tim Ream was for multiple years. Yeah. That's what Tim Ream was for multiple years. Then I have actually, and you might hate this one, I think he'll bring Miles Robinson, even if he's in MLS. Think about it this way. We don't know where Miles is going when we're recording this. We're probably going to know in the next few weeks if he's going to Europe, he's a free agent, or MLS. If Miles stays in MLS and he's performing well in MLS, I do think that doing okay in MLS. Let's say the best American center back in MLS. That fair? Right. We'll put it like that. Would it really shock you if Gregg kept calling him up? It wouldn't.
It wouldn't shock me, no. No.
So we're doing what Gregg would do. So I think it's fair to say that I think Miles has a higher chance, higher odds of staying with the national team if he stays in MLS. That's what I think. Because if he goes to Europe, I can see him getting benched and not playing, end up returning.
He won't get cupcake games.
That too. Won't get cupcake games to like outperform players that play tough for opposition, and then Gregg Berhalter keeps him. So if Miles stays in MLS, I think he will have a good shot in making it to 2026 because of our coach.
So I do not have Miles. I agree with you that that's a good possibility, but trajectory-wise, I have the same 3. I have Richards, Trusty, and CCV. I don't have Ream there. But my 4th center back is Jalen Neal. And the reason I have Neal there is because of all of our young center backs, he is the best passer. We saw this many, many times. In fact, not only is he the best passer, but he's playing at the highest level already, like starting in MLS for the Galaxy last year. For a center back at 19 years old to be starting, in still MLS, but for, any professional league really is very good. And what we saw from him in the Gold Cup, he probably outperformed Miles in the Gold Cup, or at least was similar level to Miles at that Gold Cup. The difference being Neal was able to play make from deep. And so you give Jalen Neal another 2.5 years, maybe 1 more year in MLS. Then he goes to Europe. Then you're talking about he could easily be a Bundesliga starter by the time that World Cup comes around. So my 4th center back is Jalen Neal.
It's a good bet, good gamble. The thing is, when I do these videos, I try to play it safe. And
I know, I'm more daring.
Yeah, Gregg Berhalter never called up Jalen Neal, obviously for multiple reasons.
Neal wasn't injured.
He was in the Gold Cup. He's also a teenager. It would have to be a very rapid rise from Jalen Neal. He like next season in MLS, which he did fine this season, he would have to be probably among like a top 15 defender in MLS next season already.
Not necessarily, because if he has one good season in MLS, top 15, fine. But if he's a good MLS center back at 20, I can see a European team coming for him, especially because he plays like a European player. He plays as a center back. He's as good as Tim Ream on the ball.
But Pete, you got to remember with does Berhalter make changes and call up young players quickly, or does he take his sweet time?
No, I'm not saying Berhalter is going to call him up now or even next year. I think if he's at the Olympics, he should be at the Olympics. We're very low on Olympic eligible center backs. But if he gets that move to Europe and then becomes a Bundesliga starter by the time he's 22, which Richards was for Hoffenheim, it's very possible that he could end up being on that roster. But Miles is possible too. Who knows?
Yeah, my only concern is we saw it multiple times that Gregg Berhalter takes forever to integrate a young player. So that's what I'm saying about Jalen Neal. He would have to rise right away, because if he plays super well this season and goes to Europe, Gregg might still not call him up. He might still wait a whole year to call.
So if he fair to Gregg, though, he's calling up Paredes, who's a substitute in the Bundesliga. And starting Paredes.
Well, but Paredes already had some youth call-ups also. Well, I guess Jalen Neal.
So does Neal. Yeah. I think a lot depends on how Neal does at the Olympics. Like, I don't think he'll be called up until the Olympics. I think after the Olympics is when he might be in contention.
And the depth at center back. That right. Also will play a role, right? If Gregg is still in love with Miles, he'll just keep him. But I'm keeping Miles because I think that's what Gregg would do.
Yeah. Real quick on Mark McKenzie. I have a feeling Mark McKenzie is going to be back in MLS by 2026.
Possible, even though he's starting in Belgium. MLS might offer him more money.
He's not, like, he's been there now for 3 years in Belgium, and he hasn't really gotten that much better in terms of like growth. It seems to kind of be his ceiling, almost like the Belgian league. So at what point does MLS go, well, we'll give you DP money or TAM money to come back?
Yeah, he could go to MLS and make more money and just be comfortable at home, right back to your country.
Right.
I can see that happening. Well, Matt Miazga returned eventually, even though McKenzie's in a more stable situation than Miazga. That was always moving.
Miazga was in the Eredivisie as a starter, but then he couldn't cut it in a top 5 league.
And I Belgium too. Miazga was good for Anderlecht.
Yeah, and in Belgium, right? But he couldn't cut it in a top 5 league, and I think that might end up being the same for McKenzie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's separate. I don't think McKenzie's going to be in that roster. Let's go to midfielders now. I have 6 midfielders, and this could change, obviously. I have Tyler Adams and Johnny as my 2 6s. I think even if Tyler Adams comes back worse than he was before his injury, I think Gregg will still bring him. I have 2 8s, McKennie and Musa, and then I have 2 10s, Gio and Malik Tillman.
I have the same.
The big exclusion there, and big for me, is Luca De La Torre, because I've been a huge Luca De La Torre fan for a long time, but I think it will just be the point where he'll get pushed out. Like, I think Luca's found his ceiling, and his ceiling is low or mid-level starter in La Liga, which is still not bad, but that might not be enough come 2026. You know what I mean? And I also think that Luca's inability to compete physically creates an artificial ceiling for him, and his lack of being goal dangerous, I think, is also a problem. Goals and assists are very rare for Luca.
And we also got to look at who is he competing for a spot in the roster, because Gregg Berhalter really likes to have a destroyer, and that's what Johnny and Tyler would be. So it'd be Johnny and Tyler for that 6. The 2 attacking midfielders would be mostly like Gio and Tillman, and then Luca doesn't compete with those. So he's technically competing with McKennie and Musa. He's not going to outplay those 2 on our eyes, on Berhalter's eyes. So Luca probably makes the roster in 2 situations. Someone gets injured, or Gregg decides to go 7 midfielders in this specific World Cup roster, or if they expand it again to 26 because the tournament's a bit longer.
Yeah.
But yes, in this one, I don't have Luca either. I have the same ones. Adams and Johnny as the 2 6s, McKennie and Musa as the 2 8s, and Gio and Malik Tillman as the 2 10s. And again, Gio and Tillman can also play on the wing if needed.
Yeah.
Tillman plays on the left wing for PSV quite often and has been doing fine.
Yeah. All right. So we have the same on midfielders and we had the same on fullbacks. We differed on center backs and goalkeepers. Let's go to wingers now. How many wingers do you have?
I have 4.
Same. You go first.
Pulisic and Weah. Get that out of the way. Those are the starters. I would even bet on those being the 2 starters for 2026. The other 2 I have that I think Gregg will bring, and I was more in doubt in regard to this one. It was like Zendejas because Pulisic might want that, but Gregg didn't bring him at first. So based on trajectory and where I think they'll be, I think Paredes will be there. Gregg has already brought him in, and he's not really a player that's ready, and he already brought him in. And honestly, Paredes has been slowly progressing. And if he continues to challenge himself in the Bundesliga, he'll be a better player by then, hopefully.
Yeah.
The other one is, I think a lot of people are going to disagree with this one, but the same way it was tough to get like Areola out of the roster, Morris out of the roster, Roldan, I think Aronson can be in poor form for a long time. His leash will be very long with Berhalter, and I think Brendan Aronson, even if he's back in MLS by then, I think he'll make it to the roster of Gregg Berhalter. He's disciplined. He's like says yes to everything Gregg tells him to do. Works hard. Gregg loves those hard workers.
He'll be an eyes and vibes guy.
He'll be which again, much better than bringing Roldan. Not good enough, but better than Roldan. Or Areola, it's an upgrade from that. So I'm glad we're improving that as a soccer nation here.
Yeah.
We're not a soccer nation, but just as a national team. But I would hope we can get a player that takes us to the next level. Would it be Paxton Aronson? Who knows? He's also struggling a little bit in the Bundesliga. I don't see many others. And then people are going to say Taylor Booth. Taylor Booth
has stagnated in the Eredivisie this year.
Wouldn't even say stagnated, regressed.
Regressed.
Got worse. Yeah. I'm not seeing anyone right now. The only thing I could take a bet right now, but it would depend on us getting him, is Luca Koleosho. If Luca Koleosho commits, the trajectory I'm seeing from him of at age 19 looking competent. He's not brilliant in the Premier League by any means, but competent, right? Yeah. That's enough at that age. He would probably make that roster there for Paredes or Aronson. It's just that from people I know, I've heard so many mixed reports on Koleosho in terms of what national team he'll pick that I don't feel comfortable saying he'll be with the United States right now. I would say it's 50-50 right now. It's between the U.S. and Italy. It does seem like Canada is not really an option, but I don't know. So I'm going to go with that. Paredes, Aronson, Way, and Pulisic.
So I actually think, and obviously you never want a player getting injured for any reason, but I actually think that Koleosho getting injured helps the U.S. more than it does Italy, and here's why. We don't know how that injury is going to affect him. At best, he's going to come back as good as he was before, right? You don't come back from an injury even better, usually. There's a chance it could slow him down, right?
Unless you're Kobe Bryant.
Unless you're Kobe Bryant, sure. But there's a chance he could not be as good. Also, for Italy, he's not getting FaceTime with Italy for the next 6 months. And that's allowing other young Italian players to come in and make their impression on the national team and push for a spot. So by the time he's there, Italy might go, we already have other guys. You know what I mean? Like by the time he comes back and starts being in form again, it might be like, you can still be with the under 21s, but you're not ready for the senior national team. And now Gregg is saying, do you want to come to Copa America? So I actually think it might help us. Like the silver lining of him getting injured is that it might be beneficial to the U.S. The 4 I have are Pulisic, Weah, Koleosho, and Brendan Aronson. I think that fourth guy is going to be between Aronson and Paredes. And I think if Gregg has to choose between Aronson and Paredes, he takes Aronson.
Hard worker.
Also, he's going to say World Cup experience.
Yes.
Even though he really didn't play much in that World Cup. But you know what I mean? World Cup experience, hard worker, defensive, good runner. Whereas Paredes, I think if he does bring him, it might be as that fourth fullback.
True. Possible.
So, let's go. I think strikers, we have almost the same now.
Well, strikers, it's pretty straightforward. If you project into the future, it's Balogun and Pepe. And then if one of them can't go, Sargent is probably number 3 in the list. 1, because Berhalter loves Sargent. He likes Josh Sargent quite a bit.
Yeah.
2, Sargent, before he got injured, he was on track for a 20-plus goal season in the championship.
Yeah.
So I think if Pepe or Balogun can't go, it's probably going to be Sargent. But Balogun right now is our best center forward, and Pepe has been drastically improving with PSV. And by then, Pepe will probably be a starter for PSV, or he's going to be somewhere else starting and hopefully scoring goals. So I have Balogun and Pepe with Sargent as number 3. Now you may ask, who's number 4? I don't know. Knowing Gregg, it might be Jesus. Who the heck knows?
It'll be interesting to see what strikers he ends up bringing in January. Could be Duncan McGuire.
No. Stop. That guy plays with jeans pants on. No.
That didn't stop Gregg before. Look, there's Haji Wright, who's honestly doing okay in the championship. He's not a locked-in starter, for one. Number two, 6 goals so far in the championship for the amount of minutes. It's not great. It's okay, right? And also Haji is in his late 20s now, or he's 26. I don't think he's going to really get any better. I think championship intermittent starter might be his level. Pfok, can't really see it. It was doing better with Gladbach for a while, right? But then got injured again. Then it's Jesus, Brandon Vasquez. People are saying Brandon Vasquez is going to the Premier League. Stop. He's not going to the Premier League. And if he does, he will never play. Brandon Vasquez.
Pete, you're getting it wrong. Maybe he's going to go watch a Premier League game.
Yeah, that might be what they meant. Because I don't see it. I just can't see Brandon Vasquez. He's had one good season his whole career. He's 25 now.
In MLS.
He's had one good season in MLS. This last season was not good, guys. 7 goals in MLS is pathetic. I'm sorry. He was not good. Oh, he's a good finisher. No, he's not. No, he's missed multiple chances for Cincinnati this year. So I don't even think him or Ferreira are even there. I think they're both going to stay in MLS and have nice little careers. I don't think they're even going to be in contention. I have Balo, Pepe, and Sargent, all 3, because Gregg likes Sargent.
Wait, but you have... Am I missing something? Do you have 24 players?
You brought 5 center back? No, wait. 1, 2, 3.
No, I have 4 center backs.
Oh, sorry. You're right. I have 24. Cross out Sargent. Balo, Pepe. Yeah, I added the Lund. Originally, I didn't have Lund in there, and then I rethought it. So that's why I had Sargent instead of Lund. But now that Lund is there, yeah, Sargent has to go.
That's mine too.
I will say that's a good roster. Overall, compared to any roster we've brought to a World Cup, that is the best roster we've ever brought to a World Cup. If either of our rosters are true.
Well, yeah, there's at least in the starting 11 right
it's
now.
Champions League players.
Yeah, there's no weakness besides, I guess, the goalkeeper that we're not certain right now. Everything else, the fullbacks are good, center backs are good, midfield is good, wingers, if it's Pulisic and Way, it's good, center forward good. All of these top 5 league players. This is a roster that if the coach adjusts to each opponent, they're in form. This is a roster to do damage to big boys, tough teams. Especially at home. Will it? Time will tell. Fingers crossed. Do I trust under Gregg in command? Not really. Do I hope he figures it out? Yes. Time will tell.
Yeah. All right. So these are our rosters, guys. Let us know in the comments what you think about our rosters. Who would you bring? Which do you identify more? Do you identify with more tax conservative prediction of what Gregg will do? My possibly more optimistic one. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We have 2.5 years. The last time we started this activity, Tack, was in March of 2021, which was only 18 months before Qatar. So we are actually starting. We started earlier, of course, but we're still a full year ahead of when we started doing this 18 months before Qatar. A lot can change in the next 2.5 years. Some dual nat could come out of nowhere, right? Like Maximilian Dietz, for example, could end up being a starter in that team for all we know, right? Who knows? Zion Suzuki might change his mind and become play for the U.S. Can you imagine?
Or the random kid from the 3rd division in Lithuania might commit.
Rokas Pukstas might because who knows? Look, Aiden Morris.
No. He should have gone to Canada.
He should have gone to Canada. I understand not wanting to go to Canada because you'd rather not represent. You'd rather if you can't go to the World Cup for the U.S., you don't want to go to the World Cup at all, right? That's fair.
I would never play for Canada. I can assure you that.
No, neither would I. I just couldn't get on board with it. But I'll say this. If Aiden Morris wants to go to a World Cup and that's his dream, he would go. He would actually, I don't know if he would start for Canada right now, but he'd be in the mix. He'd be in the mix in that midfield for sure.
Maybe he would. Yeah, definitely be in the roster. And if Eustachio's injured, he might actually start.
Yeah, he might just be a good backup to Eustachio, which means you're in that roster. But you know what? The man's betting on himself. He'll probably be in that Olympic squad. It'll be interesting to see how he does there. We should probably do an Olympic prediction roster. That's really hard to do because we don't know who gets released. That's why it's so hard.
Released, age, overage players. We can do a video just assuming that
everybody gets released.
Yeah, we can maybe do 2 videos for the Olympic roster, and people in the comment section can let us know. We can do one where we do the brain exercise of trying to figure out who might be released, who will be in the Copa America, and then we can also do one which like what would be the strongest possible we could bring.
Right.
That's a fun one.
Well, if you're saying outside of the Copa America roster, because strongest possible, you have a lot of our Copa America guys.
No, yeah. That's what I say. One would be hypothetical, which is a one where we bring the best possible age eligibles and 3, and then we compare mine to yours. And the other video, we can try together to think of like, okay, based on who will be in the Copa America, who won't be released, who will be in Europe, age restrictions, who will make it. That's a tough one.
If we go with best possible, Balogun, Pepe, Gio, Musa, Scally are all in that age group. That's huge. So that's something to think
about. Before we go, I'll say one thing. If we do send our best possible to the Olympics, because most teams don't care about the Olympics and don't send their best, we are actually a team to fight for a medal if we bring our best.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you're new. Go subscribe to Tactical Manager TV if you're not already. And have a very Merry Christmas. Early. Happy holidays.